Okay, when first setting up your drawing tablet, that's usually the first thing you need to do. Just know that everybody's drawing tablet's going to be a little bit different. For instance, I'm using a Wacom Bamboo tablet, which is an older version. It's a little bit smaller. Yours may be larger and have more buttons, or may be a different brand, but it should have come with some software that allows it to work properly with your computer. It's very important to install that. One way to know that it's working properly is that when I use the pen tool on my tablet, it doesn't work like a mouse. If I use just a regular mouse, you can see my mouse moving around. If I pick up my mouse and move it, well, the cursor stays in the same spot. However, if I use my pen and the driver is installed properly, you can see my mouse will jump around from one area to the other, just like it would if it was a normal sheet of paper. And that's what you want to be able to do. Make sure you have the most current version of the driver. In my case, when I tried to install it on this computer, it said it was out of date. So you may have to go to their website, find there's the Bamboo tablet, the appropriate tablet, and make sure you download it for the version of computer that you have. When you do download and install it, especially if you're using a Macintosh computer, you can go into the System Preferences, and there should be a new little icon. In this case, this icon is at the very bottom of my System Preferences, and this will give you a lot of different ways to customize how your pad will work with your computer. Now in my case, my pad has 4 little buttons at the top of my screen. It also has this little touch ring that allows me to zoom in or change the size of things. And also I have a few buttons and options for the pen that I'm using itself. Your pen should be pressure sensitive, and you can usually adjust the sensitivity of it by making it firmer or softer. And you can set what mine has little buttons on it, what those will allow you to do. For mine, I'm really not going to adjust the pen very much. I kind of like the way it's set up, but I do like to set up these express keys that are at the top of my tablet that I'm working with. These are little buttons that allow me to do things in one button press that I would probably have to use the keyboard to do. By default, sometimes they're set to either move backwards or forward or maybe show the desktop. So in this case, if I press this button on my keyboard, it'll move everything out of the way and show my desktop. What I like to do is to record some of the common Photoshop functions that I use, so I don't have to touch the keyboard with it. In this case, I'd like to be able to move up and down a layer that I work on. So I can record a keystroke, and the keystroke to record, first of all I'm going to delete both of these away, would be Command and the open bracket key, or excuse me, Option open bracket key. And with Option open bracket, and I can even give it a name, now when I'm working in Photoshop, I can move back and forth in layers. Photoshop is a little different sometimes for if you're on Windows, so just make sure you've got a common one working forward for that one. Now every time I press this key, I can move up a layer. If I press this key, I've already got it recorded to move down a layer. Another common one that you may want to record to a button is to save and to undo. So I've set my keystroke to be Command S. So all I have to do is hit this top button. It automatically saves whatever I'm working on. And if I need to undo, I've got a keystroke created of Command Z to back up from there. So setting this up is really easy, really fun to do, but it should be done first before you jump in and start using the software. We will be working in Photoshop. In my case, I'm using version CS6. However, all the techniques I'm going to cover are pretty much the same through version 4 or version 5. It was really in version 5 that they started using pen tablet capabilities in Photoshop. But most of the things can still translate into older versions if you happen to have that. Just to let you know, if you go up to Window and choose Workspace, by default, we're used to working in the Essentials that'll set up your palettes on the right-hand side to be just the default palettes. There is one set up for painting, and this is one that I like to convert to because with it chosen, On the right hand side, it'll give me all the palettes that I most commonly use, my swatches that I can pick from. Here's my history palette. It'll also give me my brush options, which I'll be using frequently, and even some preset brushes. Additionally, you always want to make sure your layers palette is open. This is a very, very common, most frequently one used from there. So if I was to set up a new document, most of the time you're going to hear me give document sizes in pixels. Why pixels? Well, if you're working on a digital document, size doesn't really matter. It's just resolution that matters. So it doesn't matter what resolution I type in here, whether it's 300 or 700, it's the number of pixels that we want to work with. In general, 3000 by 5000 is a good pixel size. There's some different sizes you can work with depending on your screen resolution. My main thing is make sure it's in the thousands. 3000 to 5000 is a good range to work on when working for a document that you're working with. We'll hit OK. Another thing to notice is when you use your tools, the main tool we're going to be using is of course our paintbrush. Make sure you're using just the regular brush. You're not using the replacement tool or the mixer brush tool. We'll get into using some of those later, but our main workhorse is going to be our brush tool. Also, it's important to know some of the keyboard shortcuts for quickly selecting tools. For instance, if I needed to choose my Move tool, if you hover over the tool, you can see there's a V in the parentheses. So if I press the V, it'll automatically choose that one. The shortcut for the brush is B, and automatically it jumps to and chooses my brush, and I can start using my brush with that one. Some of the other most common ones are your marquee tool. In this case, it's the M. If I press M, it chooses that. If I hold down the Shift key and press M, it'll cycle through. So now I've got my circular marquee, or Shift M will go back and forth between the circular and the rectangular. The lasso tools are also a common one. So you've got your regular lasso, polygon, and magnetic lasso. Notice the keyboard shortcut is just to press L for that one. The final set of keyboard shortcuts to be aware of will allow you to quickly adjust the size and the hardness of a brush that you're working with. By default, well, let's see, we'll just choose one of these first ones. Excuse me, I said default. But if you have a size brush, of course you can click on the top option and be able to adjust the size of it there, making it larger or smaller. But if you wanted to do this on the fly, use the bracket keys located next to the P. The close bracket key makes it larger, and the open bracket key will make it smaller. This way I don't have to constantly be going back and re-choosing a brush and changing the size. On the fly, using just my keyboard shortcuts, I can rechange the size of my brush that I'm working with by using the open and close bracket key. Another set of keys that are associated with it adjust the hardness of your brush. This is how soft your edge. Notice these edges are very, very soft that we're working with because the hardness is down to 0. Whereas if I bump this all the way up to 100% and now I started painting, you can see that's a very hard edge brush compared to what we did. The keyboard shortcut to change the hardness of a brush is the Shift and open and close bracket keys. Holding down Shift and using the open bracket key will make your brush much softer. Holding the Shift and the close bracket key, will make it much, much harder. So very quickly on the fly you can adjust the size by using the bracket keys and the hardness by using the Shift bracket keys. In this case, making it much softer. The final one you'll need to know about is how to quickly change the opacity of the brush you're working with. At the very top, of course, you can click and drag the slider, and this will lower the opacity of it, so you can use multiple passes to build up a color. Usually I keep mine around 10 to 30% so I can very, very gradually build up different colors. But if I wanted to use a keyboard shortcut, I can always press any one of my number keys and it will jump the opacity in increments of 10%. So watch here, I'll press the 1 key, 10%. The 4 key automatically goes to 40%. 5, 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth. Jumps in increments of 10% to automatically change the opacity of your brush. Let's get rid of all of this. We'll fill it with white. Now I got a clear space. If you do want something like 85%, just very quickly type in 85 and it will give you that type of opacity. If you want to go back to 100%, press the 0 key and automatically you're back into 100% from there. As soon as we start doing the different brushes, we'll get into how to use these different little pressure sensitivity and size sensitivity for your brushes that we're working with. The main thing is play around with using the keyboard shortcuts to change up the size, the softness, and the opacity of the brushes that you're working with.